for those of you that are here, welcome anyway. For this topic, the subject of the oneness of mankind is a really important task, important subject in the Baha'i faith, because we believe, truly believe, that this is the time and the age for the oneness of mankind to happen. So let me ask this question. Do our Christian brethren believe in the notion and the idea of the oneness of mankind? What do you think? When you talk about the notion of the one fold and the one shepherd, what exactly are you talking about, if not the oneness of mankind? The notion of the oneness of mankind exists within Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and all other major religions of the world. I grew up as a Hindu, and in Hinduism we have a notion, an idea, that there will be a time called the Sat Yuga, the age of peace and the age of the oneness of mankind. Everybody has always believed that. The distinction between everybody else and the Baha'is is that we believe that that age is now, it is here. This is the time for the establishment of the oneness of mankind. The Christian will say when Jesus comes back, and I go, yeah, absolutely, I am a Christian. I have believed in His Holiness Jesus Christ twice. Baha'u'llah is the return, the fulfillment. All the prophecies and promises given to Christians, Jews, and Muslims have been fulfilled in the coming of Baha'u'llah. I believe that with all my heart and my soul. And so the age of the oneness of mankind is here. Let me give you some good news on this. I believe truly that the oneness of mankind has already been established. I truly believe this. I want to tell you a story. 1986, I went to India for the opening ceremony of the Baha'i temple in India. We took a lot of pictures, Martha and I. We converted them into slides. Then we invited the very few friends we had left by then to watch our slides. And we lost our friends slowly. They stopped coming to our home because they didn't want to see my India slides. Now, 30 years later, many of my friends went to the opening of the Baha'i temple in Chile. And they were posting stuff online, live on Facebook. When I went to India, there was no Facebook, there was no internet, there was no whatever else the kids are doing nowadays. I'm connected to my family in India. We have WhatsApp. When they told me, why don't you get WhatsApp? I go, what's that? I mean, literally, truly, that's where it is. We are connected. Something happens. I heard last week that there was a tsunami in Indonesia. As I was looking at it on my cell phone, the tsunami in Indonesia. As I was watching that, it said, reporting from about an hour ago. So within an hour, the tsunami in Indonesia was being reported to me on my cell phone. And if I waited long enough, there probably would have been a CNN camera crew standing there. How do you feel to be living through a tsunami? It's instantaneous. When I was a kid going to school, everybody in my school looked just like me, approximately. They ate the same food, they spoke the same languages. And if many of you grew up in Iran, when you were going to school, everybody was approximately the same. That's not true of our children and our grandchildren anymore. They grow up in a diverse world. And I make this joke, Martha and I go to Costco once a week just to practice our foreign languages. Every language, every culture, every ethnicity is present right there. We are connected. We are together. For those of you that are in the medical professions know that the Human Genome Project has proved that genetically 95% of me is exactly the same as 95% of anybody else. Friends, we have been physically brought together. Science has proven that there is only one race, the human race. There are different ethnic groups, sure, but we are one race. There is no such thing. The whole notion of race is a human construct. Somebody sat down and made up something and said, let me divide humanity into different chunks. The reality is there is no multiple racial ethnic group, multiple racial groups at all. We are one human race. We have been brought together. Physically, the oneness of mankind has already been established. And that's the good news. The bad news here is that emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, psychologically, we have not yet come to the acceptance of what is in fact reality. We don't accept, people don't accept the oneness of mankind emotionally. That's the bad news. And that is why the House of Justice is urging us to go out there and influence the society, influence the thinking of society, to bring them along to the notion and the idea, indeed, humanity is one. The oneness of mankind is a true fact of life. And in fact, until and unless we get to the point where we recognize the oneness of mankind, our world, which is confused and miserable right now, will continue to be that way. The only answer that we have to establish peace and justice and unity and some semblance of sanity in our world is to recognize that mankind is indeed one. Until we get there, these problems are going to happen. Now, I always think of the Wright brothers. I think of these two guys from New Jersey that decided to go to North Carolina and they were going to make a flying machine. You know, they've tried 100+ times and they failed. The machine wouldn't fly. But each failure led them forward towards success. So after tons and lots of failures, they finally succeeded. Don't be discouraged by what goes on in the world around you. If what we are doing is sometimes doesn't work perfectly, learn from it. Reflect on it. Think about it. And the House calls on us to have reflection meetings. Reflect on it. What did you do that worked? What did you do that did not work? And how can you do it better? And each step leads us in the direction that we are going. That's the good news. And it is up to us, dear friends, to get this work of establishing the oneness of mankind done. I used to love smoking. After so many years of not smoking, I still miss it. I do. There was one idiot that got up and said smoking is bad for you. And then there were multiples, and there were more, and there were more. And suddenly it became like this non-smoking movement had reached a critical mass. And when it reached that critical mass, the turning point, whatever the 100th monkey, whatever you want to call that phenomenon, once we got there, that suddenly everybody now believes smoking is bad for you. We need to establish the idea of the oneness of mankind amongst a certain number of people. When that notion, that idea reaches that critical mass, you will find suddenly, overnight, the whole world believes the oneness of mankind is the answer. It will be a new paradigm. It will be a new way of thinking. Dear friends, it may not happen in my lifetime. It may happen in the future. But you know what? You are the planters of the seeds. You're the planters of the tree. Plant away. Go keep doing it. Some future generation will come in and enjoy the fruits of the trees you planted. As you now enjoy the fruits of the trees planted by people who went before you. If you're going to make your mark on history, as the House of Justice says, Plant the trees now, keep working. And each individual person whose heart changes is one more person who's going to become the planter of the tree of unity. That's a task, that is a job. If we are going to leave this world a better place for our children and grandchildren, we better get to work and we better be doing it. Comments, questions, anybody? You know, I like what Houston does compared to Austin. I like the fact that they give you coffee before you come up to listen to your speaker. I really truly like that. Austin does it after the speaker is over, so you can sleep through the talk. Yes, sir.
How Hitler and Mussolini practically killed millions of people, showing that perfect race is white and whatever, making race different. Now you go to Germany and you see the mixture of race and more darker, the individual, the white guys are white women, they try to marry and get white women.
Absolutely, it's gonna happen. I mean, listen, when you see marriages, you see people coming together, and listen, when you see, to me, the most important phenomenon is our children going to schools, and every school is mixed. Every school. So if you're at home telling your children that that race or that culture, whatever is bad and etc., the children are not buying into it. Because the children are sitting in those classrooms with people who are different than them, and they're going, Dad, you know, I'm not buying this nonsense. They say worse, but I'm not buying this nonsense. And dear friends, I don't know if you all have read this. The Pew Research put out an 8-year research study. And in that they basically say the largest growing religious group in America is an unaffiliated, no religion at all. And they form close to 30% of the overall population of this country. In Europe, in London, in England, for example, 49% people don't believe in any religion at all. And the reason they don't believe in religion is it's not working. They see the need for unity, our children and grandchildren. They see the need to come together, and they go home and their parents are spewing nonsense at them about race superiority or whatever. The kids are not buying into it. Whether we want our kids to be better than us or not, whether we're trying it or not, they are better than us, period. They are just so much better than us. Now, the message of the oneness of mankind that Baha'u'llah gives us is addressed to more than just individuals. It is addressed to individuals, yes, but it is also addressed to the governments of the world. It is addressed to creating a new world order. It is addressed to making the world a different place. By the way, what do you think our Christian friends believe about world government and stuff like that?
The devil.
Really? They do, don't they?
Some do.
How many of you went to church on a Christmas day? And how many of you remember singing Handel's Messiah? Handel wrote this great oratorio called Handel's Messiah. And everybody sings it at Christmas because they are waiting for the coming of Christ, and they say this is what Christ is going to be like. And it starts with the government. It's verse 12 in case you're interested. The government shall be upon his shoulder, and he shall be called the Wonderful, the Counselor, the Prince of Peace. So when you start out with the government shall be upon his shoulder, how many governments do you think they're talking about? One government? Isn't that the one world government? Doesn't a Christian inherently believe that at the return of Jesus, there will be some form of a world? We're not talking about one world government as Baha'i. We're talking about a different format, a union, a federation of nations, etc. But the notion of one world government comes from Christianity, from Judaism and Christianity. It does. Islam has similar notions and similar ideas. Do the Christians believe in world peace? Jews believe in world peace? I think swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks is talking about world peace, is it not? Why are we afraid or embarrassed by talking about these subjects when all we need to say, yes, we believe it exactly as you do? Yes, sir.
The Christians who I've encountered who are afraid of it is because, like you said, the government should be on his shoulder. There's a he there. And because they don't know that he has come, they're afraid of it. So any talk of oneness and world order and so forth is of the devil because it's absent of the he, because they don't know the he.
Absolutely. And if we don't tell them that he has come, we are missing a point. We need to point that out. Yes, absolutely. As I said, I tell people I'm a Christian. I believe in the second coming of Jesus. I have believed in His holiness, Jesus, twice. I'm fine with that. But when they say these things to you, you should tell them, yes, Baha'u'llah is the return. He's the fulfillment. You know, for some of you who have been to the Holy Land in Haifa, there is a shrine of the Bab that people in the area call the Baha'i Gardens. The prophet Elijah, whose return the Jews and the Christians are awaiting, went up in a flame of fire from the top of Mount Carmel. So when somebody says the Baha'i garden, I say, no, that's the Elijah returned. He's laid to rest here. I was fine with saying that. I didn't mind that. You should say it too. After all, the Bab is the spiritual return of Elijah. We believe that. And we should be able to say it. Now, that's getting off the topic, but I'll...
And when this comes up and I talk to Christians about it, Jesus already explained it. Because
Yes,
when John the
absolutely.
Baptist came and they said, is he Elijah? Jesus said he comes in the spirit of Elijah.
Yes.
So the idea that a manifestation can return in a different body, but the spirit is perfectly there, Jesus explained that in the New Testament.
Absolutely. And when you read what Jesus has to say about life and death, what
Right.
life is the life of the spirit, and death is death of the spirit. This thing's not working, so perhaps you have to go hit enter for me. We'll never get done this, but I'm sorry I got off the topic a little bit.
We're supposed to.
Isn't technology wonderful? Hit enter. There you go. Okay, so the Guardian, Shoghi Effendi, by the way, for those of you that are new here today, the Guardian, when I say the term Guardian or Shoghi Effendi, he was head of the Baha'i faith between 1921 and 1957. He was a great grandson of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, and he wrote a lot, mostly translated a lot of writings that we would not actually know without his translation. And so I'm going to be quoting a lot from Shoghi Effendi, who was called the guardian of the Baha'i faith. But he starts out by saying, let there be no mistake. The principle of the oneness of mankind, the pivot around which all the teachings of Baha'u'llah revolve. In essence, what he is saying, that we believe in equality of men and women, we believe in universal education, we believe in science and religion, we believe in all these principles, but they all revolve around this one basic idea, the oneness of mankind. That's the major theme of the Baha'i faith, and we believe that this is the time, this is the age for the establishment of the oneness of mankind. Its appeal is not to be merely identified with the reawakening of the spirit of brotherhood and goodwill among men, nor does it aim solely at the fostering of harmonious cooperation amongst individual people and nations. Its implications, somebody want to read for me? Riaz, read for me.
Its implications are deeper, its claims greater than any which the prophets of old were allowed to advance. Its message is applicable not only to the individual, but concerns itself primarily with the nature of those essential relationships that must bind all the states and nations as members of one human family. It does not constitute merely the enunciation of an ideal, but stands inseparably associated with an institution adequate to embody its truth, demonstrate its validity, and perpetuate its influence.
Everybody okay with that? That the oneness of mankind is a cardinal principle in the Baha'i faith, and it is not addressed merely to individuals, but it is addressed to a larger group, the community, and the relationships between the governments, etc. Next one. I don't need that. Do I?
No, it needs to be turned off.
The principle of the oneness of mankind as proclaimed by Baha'u'llah carries with it no more and no less than the solemn assertion that attainment to this final stage in this stupendous evolution is not only necessary but inevitable. The oneness of mankind is necessary and it will happen, period. That its realization is fast approaching and that nothing short of a power that is born of God can succeed in establishing it. That this oneness of mankind will happen, it is happening as I told you. Guys, think about the difference between the 1819 and 2019. Think about the differences that have come about. I think there were earthquakes and floods and tsunamis in the time of the Bab, but you would never have known about it. Now it's all instantaneous. So the changes are coming about fast and furious. And the changes are all leading us to the idea of the oneness of mankind. We are coming quickly to the point that we will have to recognize that without establishing this idea of the oneness of mankind, this world is in a terrible condition. Melanie?
I think it's really critical, that last part of the sentence, though, that nothing short of a power that is born of God can succeed in establishing it. Because we see all around us governments trying to establish just unity within their own country, and they can't even do that. And you know, to think that mankind, without the assistance of a higher power, is going to be able to successfully establish the oneness of humankind. I mean, I think scientists around the world know that there's only one humankind, for example, but now people are turning against science and ignoring what scientists have to say about not only this, but climate and vaccines and whatever else you want to say. So I think that, this is something that is hard for people to accept, that there is a God, number one, because they see it as being divisive rather than accepting of everyone. But that's a crucial fact.
Absolutely. Thank you for stating that. I'm kind of rushing through this stuff. But yes, it's absolutely crucial what Melanie points out, that nothing short of the power that is born of God can succeed in establishing it, meaning the oneness of mankind must be established through faith, religion, if you want to call it that. The last point, I mean, you guys are reading this quickly, but it calls for no less than the reconstruction and demilitarization of the whole civilized world. Dear friends, if you read Baha'u'llah's letter to the kings and rulers, every letter he wrote is different. But most of those letters have one unifying theme. Stop spending all your money on guns and weapons and castles and start serving the needs of the poor. The poor in your midst are my trust, he says to Napoleon. Guard ye well this trust. In essence, dear friends, we are saying this. We're saying that America spent last year $720 billion on Department of Defense. Do you know how much is spent on the Department of Peace? There is no Department of Peace. So why then are you shocked? Why then are you surprised that we are involved with so many wars? I mean, hell, you don't prepare for anything but war, you will have a war. And listen, it's not the people who send people to war to make the decisions that are going out to get themselves shot. They're sending the children of the poor and the, people that don't have any other means to get their heads shot off. Why are we doing this? If we are a Christian country, there is, Matthew chapter 25 talks about the least amongst these. Jesus said, I was homeless and you didn't come to see me. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. I was, etc. And they asked Jesus, Lord, when did we do these things? He said, what you did to the least amongst these, you did unto me. So where is that notion, the idea of service to the poor, the homeless? You go outside here on the streets, and there are people sleeping on the streets. And you ever talk to some of them, you realize most of them are veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam, etc. These people have served the country, and they are suffering. They have illnesses caused by war. And they're sleeping on the street, and we're spending $700 billion on guns and weapons. What nonsense! How can you have peace until you stop doing this? I'm not suggesting that everybody become like Costa Rica and give up their army. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that there needs to be some form of defense, some form of internal order and security. The Baha'i faith suggests that. But to spend, and then we are only spending a small percentage of our gross domestic product on Department of Defense. Other countries, poorer countries, are spending 40, 50, 30% of, look at Iran. I mean, there is poverty, serious poverty in Iran, and they're spending their money building weapons. I mean, why? When people are hungry and people are rioting on the streets because they can't buy onions and tomatoes, why would you be spending your money on atomic bombs? Nonsense. Okay? Huh? This oneness of mankind, dear friends, the Baha'i faith truly believes, represents the last stage in the evolution of mankind. We come from villages and towns and cities, etc., and we're growing, the unity is growing larger and larger. This is the final stage in the evolution of mankind. We finally start to recognize the oneness of all people. Okay. He speaks about the war, the First World War, and he says the First World War was caused by what? And read the underlying portion, Nadji.
The last one?
Just the underlying piece.
But rather to the failure of those into whose hands the immediate destinies of peoples and nations have been committed, to adjust their system of economic and political institutions to the imperative needs of a rapidly evolving age.
World War happened because the leaders didn't seem to recognize what they needed to do in the times in which they were. Keep going.
Are not these intermittent crises that convulse present-day society due primarily to the lamentable inability of the world's recognized leaders to read aright the signs of the times, to rid themselves once for all of their preconceived ideas and fettering creeds, and to reshape the machinery of their respective governments according to those standards that are implicit in Baha'u'llah's supreme declaration of the oneness of mankind, the chief and distinguishing feature of the faith he proclaims.
So what does the Baha'i faith believe? What is the vision of the Baha'i faith? I hope you remember from the book of Proverbs, there's a quote in the book of Proverbs that I just absolutely love. And it essentially says, where there is no vision, people perish. Think about that. Where there is no vision, people perish. Guys, every day I turn on the TV, and by the way, I have stopped watching news. I don't watch news anymore because I feel like I'm about to die and the world is about to blow up and climate change is going to flood where I live. By the way, that's the other reason we moved to Austin. I think Houston's going to be underwater soon. But anyway, the Baha'i vision is the emergence of a world community, the consciousness of world citizenship, and the founding of world civilization and culture. By the way, you talk to our kids and talk to them and they say, where are you from? And they say, we are from the world. What is your race? We are a human race. Our kids are starting to answer, Baha'i kids are getting pretty clever about answering questions about who they are. They refuse to acknowledge that they're from some specific place or some specific thing. They acknowledge that they are human beings and they're from the whole world. Melanie, read that.
The whole thing or just underline?
It's not very large. You can read the whole.
Unification of the whole of mankind is the hallmark of the stage which human society is now approaching. Unity of family, of tribe, of city-state, and nation have been successively attempted and fully established. World unity is the goal towards which a harassed humanity is striving. Nation building has come to an end. The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving towards a climax. A world growing to maturity must abandon this fetish, recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relationships, and establish once for all the machinery that can best incarnate this fundamental principle of its life.
The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving towards a climax. A world going to maturity must abandon this fetish. The fetish of my nation is better than your nation and my country is better than your country. Give it up, guys. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for the last 150 years. And so you're going around patting yourself on the back because you happen to be American or you happen to be Indian or something. Just give it up. Quit. You know, every group, every ethnicity has contributed something to the progress of this world. When I get in and start my car, as long as it starts, I don't curse the manufacturer of the car. I don't say who invented the automobile or who invented air conditioning, by the way, in Texas. Who invented air conditioning? I use it. The state is saying my group created this or my group, it's like, who cares? Everybody uses everything that is available to us. Be proud of the fact that you have a car and you don't have to walk. So, Chogi Effendi then lays out what the future commonwealth of this world should look like. It's a 16-point program, and I want to just very quickly, because my time's sort of running out, and I hear Mehran snoring already. So I want to kind of run through these 16 points really quickly and have them read one at a time. So let's start. Who wants to read? Read the first one.
Consist of a world.
Stop it. The world is commonwealth.
This commonwealth must, as far as we can visualize it, consist of a world legislature whose members will, as the trustees of the whole of mankind, ultimately control the entire resources of all the component nations, and will enact such laws as shall be required to regulate the life, satisfy the needs, and adjust the relationships of all races and people.
So,
world
wait. So the first point is basically this, that a world legislature which controls and manages affairs of the world, so that America doesn't have to go to war in some country because they have the oil. I mean, stop this nonsense. The resources of the world belong to the world. Let's share them equitably. Let's share them so everybody has their portion. Not, to me, I have TVs, all my television sets are made in Korea or Japan. Why? Because they make the best TVs and the cheapest TVs. Costco sells them. Why would I say I want to buy an American-made TV? Why? If they do a better job of making TV, by all means, let me have a Korean TV. I'm fine with this. Next one. Go ahead, Melanie, read the next one.
A world executive backed by an international force will carry out the decisions arrived at and apply the laws enacted by this world legislature, and will safeguard the organic unity of the whole Commonwealth.
So let me make a point on this thing. When there was war between Israel and the Arabs, they had what is called the United Nations peacekeepers sitting in between the two sides. And you recognize them, they're called blue hats because they wear blue berets. These are the United Nations peacekeepers. So you feel like you're watching a tennis match. The ball's going this way and that way and the guy's looking like this. Nothing, no power, no authority. They couldn't stop it and say, please stop shooting at these people. And you guys stop shooting also. They're a peacekeeping force with no authority, with no power. So they're a peacekeeping force in name only. We need a real peacekeeping force to keep two sides apart. If they start fighting, just separate them. Stop, please. Stop killing people for no apparent reason. Next. Somebody, anybody.
The World Tribunal will adjudicate and deliver its compulsory and final verdict in all and any disputes that may arise between the various elements constituting this universal system.
You know, I grew up in India, and India and Pakistan have been fighting. I grew up partially in Pakistan too, but Pakistan and India have been fighting since 1947 about who owns Kashmir. Every 2 or 3 years they go to war, they kill a couple of million people, then they go back to their respective borders. Iran and Iraq fought a war for 8 years, and they killed probably 1 million Iraqis and 1 million Iranians. And then they all went back to exactly where they were. What the hell are we doing here? If you have a dispute about a given territory, let somebody else get. Why did America have to invade Kuwait to get Saddam Hussein out of there? Why? What is it America's business? Kuwait had oil. But what business did we have in Kuwait? Somebody, international body, should have gone in and decided the dispute. Why can't we have this? Why does one country have to bully anybody else? The last one, number 4 has already happened, I think. Riaz, you can read that one.
A mechanism of world intercommunication will be devised, embracing the whole planet, freed from the national hindrances and restrictions, and functioning with marvelous swiftness and perfect regularity.
Although Iran has shut down Facebook, I think, or they shut down something, but the international communication working with regularity and swiftness, that's already here. That has been established.
Of course, he wrote that in like 1940.
Oh, this particular letter was written in 1942. You're correct. You're correct. It was a 42 letter. Huh? Absolutely. But World Order Baha'u'llah has multiple letters in it, and this was a 42 letter. Well, read the next one, Hormuz. I can see. All right. I was going to, okay.
A world metropolis will act as the nerve center of the world civilization, the focus towards which the unifying forces of life will converge, and from which its energizing influences will radiate.
Keep going. Somebody just start reading.
A world script, a world literature, a uniform and universal system of currency, of weights and measures to simplify and facilitate intercourse and understanding among the nations and races of mankind.
This is funny because I think you had put on Facebook that while the government is shut down, let's change to metric system. I mean, it's like, really, we need to do something. We can't even figure out, if you live in England, they drive on the wrong side of the street. They tell us we drive on the wrong side of the street. We can't agree on anything. What's the difference between, I was watching cricket the other night and the guy throws a ball and he said, that's 150K. And I go, I grew up playing cricket and watching the ball being thrown in miles per hour. I don't know how fast this guy is. I mean, literally, we need to have a uniform system of some kind. World language will be invented or we will adopt one, and I have always prayed that we will adopt English because it keeps me from having to learn a new language. Next one. Would you like to read it? Point number 8.
In such a world society, science and religion, the two most potent forces in human life, will be reconciled, will cooperate, and will harmoniously develop.
This what Melanie was talking about earlier, that they're saying vaccination is bad for you. But like, what idiotic things are you talking about? Polio, one of the worst diseases that used to afflict so many people, has been cured by polio vaccination. Vaccination works. That's my belief. And if you don't believe that, I'm fine with that. I believe truly.
Come talk to me.
Yeah, come talk to Dr. Morgan. But vaccination works. There are people. Friends, one of the worst things that happens is, and I'm sorry, but I have seen this happen again and again. When something happens, there is a problem, a healthcare issue, etc., the CNN reporter and these guys, they go to the poorest, the trailer's homes or something, and stick a microphone in somebody's mouth and say, what do you think? And he goes like, why are you asking this guy? Why don't you ask a scientist? And why does this clergyman who barely got through seminary now is pontificating on science, which he knows nothing about? I mean, literally, if you went to Melanie and said, my car's not starting, can you help me? She doesn't know anything about automobiles, hopefully.
I know how to jump it.
But the problem is, you find the expert on that particular topic and ask them about that topic. Why do you go to the least unaware? Look, hundreds of people, thousands of people are walking away from religion because religion does not agree with science. You send your child to medical school, and then the child comes back and you ask the child, do you think we can raise up the dead? And the child goes, no, I'm in medical school, I know you can't do that. So millions of people are walking away from religion because religion doesn't seem to agree with science. The number 9 is really, you want to read that?
The press will, under such a system, while giving full scope to the expression of the diversified views and convictions of mankind, cease to be mischievously manipulated by vested interests, whether private or public, and will be liberated from the influence of continued governments.
Our press doesn't do that. Our press is very good.
That sounds national.
But reality, dear friends, is that the reason I stopped watching the news is whenever you turn on the news, what they're telling you, you don't believe. I have stopped believing the news. And I really need to know what's going on in the world. I need a news channel that gives me news.
BBC.
Huh? BBC is really good. I think Al Jazeera is good. There's a channel from Israel called I-24 that gives really good news. So there are some. But the American news, and by the way, if you ever go to India, you'll find the press is just horrible. The press is horrible. And
Bias. It's all advertising.
the economic resources of the world will be organized, the sources of raw material will be tapped and fully utilized, its markets will be coordinated and developed, and the distribution of his products will be equitably regulated. Dear friends, some years ago, this is almost 20 years ago, there was an item in the newspaper that Australia and America had dumped millions of tons of wheat into the ocean. Because there was such a bumper crop of wheat that they did not want the prices of wheat to go down, so they dumped wheat into the ocean. While there are people here going hungry, these people are dumping foods into the ocean. That is patently unfair. That's patently unjust. How can you do this? Oh, we want the price to stay up. And so point number 10 deals with that type of issue. You can't continue to do this. You have to have a fair and equitable distribution. And so somebody's hungry, you give it to them for free. Why not? It's better than dumping it into the ocean.
They do that at like a bunch of different grocery stores that have the delis, and I've worked like in those places, and at the end of the day, through all that food, I'm like, why don't you guys give this to somebody? Well, we can't for legal reasons. That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
No, but here's the problem there. Let me explain. There is that problem there. Maybe there is some issues of legal issues. Okay, I understand that. But only in America where we have so many lawyers, do we have that kind of an issue. Australia doesn't have that issue. They still did the same bloody thing. That to me is like, okay, why are you doing this? Australia also shot a lot of sheep because the price of mutton was too low. I mean, they keep doing this.
Ajit,
How?
that's why the number of the people who don't believe in religion is going up. Because of all of these things that is happening.
Well, actually, yeah, but throwing food in the grain, that was not the religious guys.
You know, don't pay attention to the poor people, all of this.
No, they don't. Let's read this thing through because my time's almost up. Nadji, read it.
National rivalries, hatreds, and intrigues will cease, and racial animosity and prejudice will be replaced by racial amity, understanding, and cooperation. Economic barriers and restrictions will be completely abolished, and the inordinate distinction between classes will be obliterated. Destitution on the one hand and gross accumulation of ownership on the other will disappear.
Friends, this is a very sore point with me. This is a real sore point with me. I don't mind having everything that I want to have. I want everybody else to have their fair share. But to have multi-billions of dollars while somebody's hungry is just patently, obviously unjust, unfair. It cannot be allowed to go on. And let me make sure you know my opinion on the subject. There will come a time when people will rise up against the rich. And there are nations and countries where people who are rich and wealthy live behind gates. Venezuela used to be one of those countries, I had somebody talk about it recently, that people live behind locked gates because they're afraid if you're wealthy, they'll kidnap you and hold you off for ransom. This has to stop. And the people who are doing the kidnapping and ransom, etc., they're doing the wrong thing. I'm not condoning it, but I'm saying it's an issue of desperation. Look, I have children, I have grandchildren. If my grandchildren were hungry, you don't know what the heck I would do to get them some food. I would, so would you. Okay? So, next one.
The enormous energy dissipated and wasted on war, whether economic or political, will be consecrated to such ends as will extend the range of human invention and technical development, to the increase of the productivity of mankind, to the extermination of disease, to the extension of scientific research, to the raising of the standard of physical health, to the sharpening and refinement of the human brain, to the exploitation of the unused and unsuspected resources of the planet, to the prolongation of human life, and to the furtherance of any other agency that can stimulate the intellectual, the moral, and spiritual life of the entire human race.
Last one, point 16, Riyadh. I want to make sure you're awake, Riyadh, that's why I'm asking you to read.
I still miss my cigarettes though. The world federal system ruling the whole earth and exercising unchangeable authority, unchallengeable authority over its unimaginably vast resources, blending and embodying the ideals of both the East and the West, liberated from the curse of war and its miseries, and bent on the exploitation of all the available resources of energy on the surface of the planet, a system in which force is made the servant of justice, whose life is sustained by its universal recognition of one God and by its allegiance to one common revelation. Such is the goal towards which humanity, impelled by the unifying forces of life, is moving.
Who can doubt that such a consummation, the coming of age of the human race, must signalize in its turn the inauguration of a world civilization such as no mortal eye have ever beheld or human mind conceive? Who is it that can imagine the lofty standard of such a civilization as it unfolds itself, is destined to attain? Who can measure the heights to the true intelligent, liberated from its shackles? Who can visualize the realms which the human spirit, vitalized by the outpouring light of Baha'u'llah, shining in the plenitude of its glory, the sky?
Dear friends, Baha'u'llah, in his dying days, 1892, when he was about to pass away, brought his family and friends that were gathered there in Bali together, and he praised them. He talked about what they had done, etc. And then he said something like, "We have not failed in giving you this message that we need to." And then he says, "Let us see what your efforts in the path of service will now achieve." In a sense, dear friends, that still remains true today. It is our task to work in his path to achieve the goal he has laid out before us. And I thank you, dear friends.